El título evocador de impactos relacionados con el clima, el tiempo y el agua en América Latina y el Caribe, alianzas para fortalecer los sistemas de alerta temprana de amenazas múltiples. Este evento regional es auspiciado conjuntamente por las asociaciones regionales 3, América del Sur, y 4, América del Norte, América Central y el Caribe, de la Organización Meteorológica Mundial, y está coorganizado con la Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe y la Oficina de las Naciones Unidas para la Reducción de Riesgo de Desastres, para presentar este informe sobre el estado del clima en América Latina y el Caribe 2021 y permitir un diálogo con los socios de la región sobre las oportunidades de fortalecer los sistemas de alerta temprana multirriesgo en América Latina y el Caribe. Los dos objetivos principales de este evento son, pues, promover una asociación de alto nivel entre instituciones internacionales, regionales y financieras para identificar áreas específicas de colaboración, para apoyar a la consolidación y a la expansión de los sistemas de alerta temprana a través de pronósticos basados en el impacto y en alertas basadas en el riesgo de eventos meteorológicos, hídricos y climáticos extremos. Esto permitirá identificar los mensajes clave de la región para promoverlos en la Conferencia de las Partes, COP27, de la próxima reunión del Convenio Marco de Naciones Unidas sobre el Cambio Climático. Para empezar este evento tenemos un mensaje del profesor Petteri Talas, secretario general de la OMM. Adelante con el mensaje, por favor.
Greetings from World Meteorological Organization in Geneva. I'm sorry that I cannot join you at the event in Cartagena, but I'm happy to deliver this message through video. And I would be happy to thank the partners of this event, especially ECLAC and ministers and ministries and all the audience and WMO PRs who are present at this event. We started a new practice to publish regional climate reports a couple of years ago, and this is now the second report for Latin America and Caribbean region, where you are very vulnerable to impacts of climate change. We have this global challenge, and what we have seen from the most recent WMO and IPCC reports is that we have started seeing the impacts of climate change hitting all parts of the world. We have a growing amount of heat waves. At the moment, there's a major heat wave going on in Europe with record-breaking temperatures. But this is happening. This has been happening worldwide. It has been observed in all parts of the world. And some parts of the world have become drier because of climate change, and we have started seeing more flooding events in some parts of the world. And of course, this kind of variability between drought and flooding also in sometimes in the same region. In your part of the world, what are the specific features is that the Caribbean region and Central American region are exposed to tropical storms, hurricanes, and we have been warming the ocean. We have been storing more than 90% of the excess heat to ocean, and that means that we have more energy for the tropical storms, and also there's more evaporation from the ocean. This a little bit more than 1 degree warming so far has contributed to around 10% increase of the humidity, which means that when it rains as part of these storms, it rains more, so there's more severe flooding problem happening. And that's one of the very specific features of your region, and we have seen also the most dramatic impacts of those storms hitting the Caribbean islands. Dominica is having the world record. You have lost 800% of your GDP in one hurricane in 2017. Last year's hurricane season was third strongest season, and we may see stronger seasons in the future, and these storms can be observed in wider areas, as we have seen, for example, in southern Africa during recent years. And then, of course, you are also experiencing the melting of glaciers. What's happening in the Andean region is having an impact on the availability of fresh water in the rivers, and that's the scenarios are not very promising from that perspective. It seems that this melting of glaciers will continue for the coming hundreds of years, even thousands of years, and that will also contribute to the sea level rise, especially the melting of Greenland and Antarctic glaciers. So we will see long and more persistent melting of those glaciers, and also more permanent sea level rise. And the sea level rise in your part of the world has been above the average of the world. And then the third specific issue in your part of the world is this Amazonian rainforest and its future. And we have already seen that the Amazonian rainforest has become drier. There has been a local climate change thanks to deforestation, and that has been boosting this drying of the region. At the same time, we have been able to observe that at least some parts of the Amazonian region have become source of carbon instead of sink of carbon, and it's very important to stop this deforestation, which is partly related to the meat production and feed for cattle channels. Globally, we made a great step forward at the last COP26 in Glasgow. Especially the richest countries were making pledges that would keep us on 1.5 degrees track, but unfortunately many others didn't, and that's why we are not heading towards 1.5 degrees warming at the moment, rather towards 2.5 to 3 degrees range, with growing amount of negative impacts of climate change. And besides climate mitigation, it's important to pay attention to climate adaptation. And one of the very powerful ways to adapt to climate change is to invest in early warning services. And that's why Secretary General Guterres has given WMO a mandate to prepare a major action plan and initiative to be approved by the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt this November. And we are working for that, and our aim is to invest in basic observing system as part of our systematic observation financing facility program. We have already this cruise program for early warning service development that needs to be scaled up and continued, and we also have to pay attention to observing systems of hydrology and related services. These components contain this early warning service initiative that we are promoting, and we are seeking for partnership of financing institutions like World Bank, regional banks, and Green Climate Fund and UNDP to coordinate the big package to be approved by the COP27. Altogether, there's a need of 1.5 billion US dollars investments during the coming 5 years to get 100% coverage of early warning services and improve the basic observing systems. We have major gaps in island states, Africa, and also some parts of Latin America, and that needs to be improved. With these words, I would like to wish you a successful meeting, and thanks for your great contribution to this report that you are dealing with today, and we are happy to continue collaborating with you also in the future. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Peter Italas. Para continuar con el programa, quiero informar que tenemos ya conectadas 1.450 personas que están registradas en el sistema de enlaces de Internet, y hay participación de más de 73 países de África, Europa, Asia y América. Es decir, que tenemos una audiencia muy amplia en este momento. Y esta transmisión se hace en tiempo real en canales de YouTube. Ahora deseo invitar al doctor Wenjiang Zhang, subsecretario general de la Organización Meteorológica Mundial, para que nos presente el informe sobre el estado del clima en América Latina y el Caribe 2021. Doctor Zhang, tiene usted la palabra. Pueden lanzar el informe.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. Dear Madam Yolanda, the president of WMO Regional Association 3, and Mr. Ivan, and the president of WMO Region 4, and Celeste, the first vice president of WMO, and dear PRs and colleagues, and online participants, and good morning from this beautiful city, but I know that we have a world participants, and anyhow, it's welcome you all to this great event. We are all happy to hear the high-level briefing and by the opening remark from Professor Talas, the Secretary General of World Meteorological Organization, and basically he opening remark captured most of the significant points in the report. And take the chance, I really would like to thank all the people who contribute to this, it's a great work. And let me start for this PowerPoint. And also I thank to my colleagues prepared this quite comprehensive. The briefing, it's a PowerPoint and a little bit long. However, that be more than half years of many people contribute to this great work. So please be patient. And certainly, that's still much less than the full report. First, show you some numbers. And first, the second of this kind of Latin America regional climate statement. And led by the WMO Regional Association 3 and 4. And we have 55 experts from the region and around the world. And it's working on this report. And also we have 19 international and regional institutions, 29 national meteorological and hydrological services, and also 10 United Nations agencies directly involved in this report. And so the outline of this report, actually now you can download from WMO website. At first is a regional climate, and followed by extreme events. And the third part will be climate-related impacts and risks. And finally, it's a WMO and also in a region that how we prepare to enhance our climate resilience and adaptation policy action. And so this is quite comprehensive and very valuable. It's a report and can be used by many organizations. At the beginning, you will see the forward from Professor Talas and Secretary General of World Meteorological Organization, and also you see the preface from the Economic Commission of Latin America and Acting Executive Secretary. And I really would like to thank them to make a greater support and also guide this regional climate report development. And as Professor Talas said, this been a practice start from several years ago. And you may know that the WMO have a global climate statement more than 20 years. But we start a regional climate report, try to reflect more regional specific facts, and also regional, more detailed extreme events and across all WMO regions. So this is the second in our region. First, you see the temperature. I do believe that you also feel that the temperature high in the room, right? And but the facts is that you see, in the past 30 years, from 1991 to 2021, and we have see the temperature increase in the region was around 0.2 degree the average rate compared to the 30 years average from 1961 to 1990, which is 0.1 degree per decade. Even looks like the number is small, but it's quite significant. And the right panel, you will see that the temperature was above 1981 to 2010 average in all sub-regions. So this is very clear that it's warming globally and regionally. This gives more detail. It's in some region and even some country. And you will see the dot, that the red one means above its average. It's a positive anomaly. And certainly you will see some, it's a blue part, which is only a few dots and across the whole region. So the temperature increase is very visible. Second important climate variables is the precipitation, rainfall. And what's the rainfall situation? And in comparison to the temperature, that more homogeneity is warming. But here you see the precipitation, that you see the blue part representing the above anomaly, and the red part is less rainfall than average. So this shows you the pattern and across the region, and also see some specific in some country like Mexico and Central America and Caribbean, but you will see the whole picture, which you really see the rainfall pattern is changing as well due to the climate change. Glacier is critical, and this is our, it's a solid water reservoir. But you will see the acceleration of the glacier melting across the region. And we have been losing the mass over the past decades, and the loss rates are among the highest globally. So this will be a big concern. That's why this region often refer to the water, to the hydrological issues as one of the priority in our region. But that's a real fact, which I do believe that national observation can also demonstrate and this evidence. Sea level. We have a long coastline in our region, but the sea level in the region continue to rise and at the faster rate than globally among the Atlantic coast of South America and south of the equator, and also subtropical North Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. So this is a clear evidence. Even you will see the exact number in the different sub-region. Tropical cyclone, and the Secretary General in his opening remark said that last year, 21, we have a few. It's a strong hurricane, but still have a quite a significant impact to the region. So this is the one slide which I can show you the heavy precipitation and flood due to this extreme rainfall, especially the hurricane, and across the region led to hundreds of lives lost, tens of thousands of homes destroyed or damaged, and hundreds of thousands of people displaced. There are a lot of detail in the report, and I hope that you can pay attention. For example, the corner that some part of the Brazil that lead to the economic loss 3.1 billion and more than 800,000 affected people. So this is quite significant in the region. Certainly, too much water is a problem, but too less water is also a big problem for us as well. So drought affected several countries and regions in Latin America during last year, including most of Mexico, part of the Central America and the Caribbean, and parts of the subtropical South America. So this are a lot of facts in the report, and hope that you can also refer to the report and refer to the national report with regard to the droughts. Heat wave and wildfires. Certainly, that's also largely due to the droughts as well due to the temperature increase, which lead to some extreme heat wave events and wildfires. So I do not want to go to detail, but you see the dots are the facts observed and recorded and in the past year. Also, it's not. Someone feels strange, and we have a cold wave, but heat wave, but we also have cold waves. But that's really true. And intense cold waves or cold spell episode occurred in many locations of southern South America, mainly from June to August. And you see the map that shows the location as well. That's the real the country impacted by the cold waves. Deforestation. This is something. It's not it's natural, but something linked to the human activities. Deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon rainforest doubled compared to the 2009 to 2018 average, reaching its highest level since 2009. So this is a serious concerns. So we should really see that what kind of policy really can save the world, and also it's try to mitigate this climate change, climate impact to our region. Ocean and the coastal ecosystem, as you know, yes, this also it's an impact of this climate change. And there's a lot of negative impact which you can see clearly from some of the observations. I have one more slide after this agriculture and the food security. And we know that the food security is a big issue across the globe, but also it's critical for our region to pay greater attention to see the climate impact to agriculture and the food security. And I encourage you to read detail in this report and find some more and the facts which can really alert our society and to pay more attention to the food security of climate change. Yeah, this is what I refer to the impact with the coast. You see that this is a photo and Saksam, and the photo was taken by a drone, and see the larger areas which really impact tourists and also impact the biosystem along the coast. And this become more and more visible in many of the countries that which can have accumulated economic loss. And in this region can be it's 50 to 70 billion during the period of 2020 to 2023. And the climate impact to our society can be seen very strong evidence. The displacement and climate-induced migrations. Extreme climate events, slow onset climate change, influenced human mobility pattern and induced population displacement throughout 2021 in our region. So this is quite clear. It's evidence. Many it's events, and show the clearly the evidence, the impact to our people in the region. Yeah, and dear colleagues, that WMO community now is act up, really make a greater effort improving multi-hazard risk information system and also our climate service. So we realized, and all the government realized the importance of strengthening climate service, including, but not limited to, the early warning. It is increasingly recognized in the region. And over 60% of the national determined contributions report. This is the NDC is referred to the commitment to the Paris Agreement. They all mentioned about the early warning. So this is the greater success of WMO communication at the UNFCCC at the global and the regional level, that the climate change and the national determined contribution. And now is really pay attention to the extreme events and also early warning. So this is it's a big progress, but we need more effort. Continue to promote, to communicate the climate change and the climate impact to the global and the regional aspects. We do have some efforts that it's also project and big initiatives like a multi-hazard early warning system. The data from the WMO members suggest that the Latin American region face severe early warning capacity gap. And I do not want to go to detail, but if you look at the picture, and you will see what are the critical gap we are facing, and we must make a great effort to fill the gap to enhance our capability for the early warning and face on this multi-hazard information system to facilitate our government and all the agency take a collective action to mitigate the climate change impact. This is my last slide, and as Professor Talas briefed us in his opening remark that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has tasked World Meteorological Organization to lead the efforts and present an action plan to achieve this goal at the next UN Climate Reference in Egypt in the coming September. And he made the call very strong and would like to see in the next 5 years, we should have all the nations have the early warning system, and the capability should be greatly enhanced. But certainly, in addition to this, WMO also have a new initiative called the Global Greenhouse Gas Budget Monitoring System. And my colleague Lars Peter now is in the secretary, the leader for the secretary to support to all the members. I do hope that our region also be proactive to respond to the call from UN Secretary General and from World Meteorological Organization for the new initiatives. So this is my open call for all the PRs, all these dear colleagues, and back to your nation, report to your minister vertically, and especially for the your national delegation, which will attend the COP27 in Egypt, to give a strong support to the WMO initiative and get the needed resources, 1.5 billion in the next 5 years, and greatly strengthen our capability, build our powerful system, and build our greater partnership with all the members in the region, in the country. We do have existing big programs like GMAS, like CRUISE, like GFCS, like SOF. But all of this will underpin our early warning system and also global greenhouse gas budget monitoring system. Dear colleagues, thank you so much for your patience, and it's really my big thanks to all of you. Gracias. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Dr. Zhang, por esta instructiva presentación con un panorama de la situación actual, con muchos desafíos en materia del clima para nuestros países, para nuestros dirigentes y para nuestras poblaciones, y en particular con nuevos problemas inducidos por el clima, como las migraciones, lo cual explica el mensaje del Secretario General de Naciones Unidas para la OMM, pidiéndole liderar este esfuerzo y presentar un plan de acción de alerta temprana a nivel internacional. Ahora voy a invitar a Su Excelencia el doctor Carlos Correa, Ministro de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible de Colombia, que es el país que está hospedando esta reunión. Él nos ha enviado una declaración que será presentada en un video enviado desde Bogotá. Adelante.
Un saludo especial a la honorable mesa, honorables delegaciones, a observadores y demás personas presentes en la sala y en nuestra transmisión en vivo. El momento del cambio ya está aquí. Nos enfrentamos a tiempos más exigentes, pero estamos en el momento de convertir estos desafíos en oportunidades. Este reporte sobre el estado del clima en América Latina y el Caribe pone en manifiesto los graves impactos del cambio climático en nuestros ecosistemas, la seguridad alimentaria e hídrica, la salud de las personas y la lucha contra la pobreza. Hoy la ciencia nos demuestra que nuestra región sigue siendo vulnerable ante los efectos del cambio climático. La tendencia del calentamiento en América Latina se ha duplicado. Los glaciares de los Andes tropicales han perdido al menos un 30% de su superficie desde la década de 1980. Tuvimos la tercera temporada de huracanes en el Atlántico, la más activa en el 2021, en donde Colombia por primera vez se vio enfrentado a un huracán categoría 5 en nuestro archipiélago de San Andrés, Providencia, Santa Catalina y Los Cayos. Nuestra región se ha visto afectada con migraciones y desplazamientos climáticos, fenómenos que se han aumentado en los últimos 8 años. El IPCC indica que la adaptación en su mayoría es fragmentada y diseñada para responder a impactos actuales o riesgos de corto plazo, reduciendo la oportunidad de adaptación transformacional. Durante esta semana hemos discutido la importancia de mejorar la comprensión global del estado del clima, así como la predicción y proyección de futuros escenarios climáticos. Es una necesidad trabajar por mejorar nuestros sistemas de alertas tempranas. Mantener y perfeccionar la infraestructura actual es un reto para dar cumplimiento a las disposiciones de la Red Básica de Observación Global. La provisión de datos es una prioridad que debemos garantizar para que nuestra región cuente con el apoyo financiero para la generación de datos que permita dar respuestas a estos llamados en materia de acción climática, incluida la adaptación. Es el momento de promover sinergias para asegurar nuestras fuentes de supervivencia y defender de manera activa la biodiversidad. Nuestro verdadero legado consiste en la implementación de acciones inclusivas, equitativas y sostenibles y el establecimiento de una gobernanza global hacia un futuro más esperanzador. Hoy puedo decir que Colombia convirtió su ambición en acción. Nuestra agenda ambiental, social y económica refleja cómo, desde el compromiso de una nación, se puede contribuir al futuro que queremos. El presidente Duque deja un gran legado en materia de acción climática a través del establecimiento de la creación de la Comisión Intersectorial del Gabinete Presidencial para la Acción Climática, como una instancia para la coordinación, orientación y evaluación de los avances alcanzados con respecto a los compromisos internacionales del país. Aumentamos la ambición climática con la actualización de la NDC, fijando la meta de reducción de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en un 51% para el año 2030. Como eje transversal de estas políticas adoptamos la Ley de Acción Climática, un hito en la legislación del país, que incluye acciones para fomentar la educación ambiental, reducir la deforestación a 0 en el 2030 y restaurar 1 millón de hectáreas, de manera articulada con la hoja de ruta hacia la carbono neutralidad, enmarcada en la estrategia de largo plazo E2050. Y quiero terminar haciendo un especial reconocimiento a la gran labor que ha ejercido nuestra directora del IDEAM, la ingeniera Yolanda González. Gracias a ella hemos logrado consolidar nuestras necesidades como región. Gracias al equipo del IDEAM. El llamado es a la acción. Necesitamos consolidar el multilateralismo y unificar nuestras prioridades con el fin de asegurar la sostenibilidad financiera que requerimos. Nuestro compromiso es con las personas. Alertas tempranas, acción temprana.
Sí, muchas gracias al doctor Carlos Correa, ministro de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible de Colombia, por su análisis muy claro y juicioso. Ha subrayado que la región es vulnerable y que es necesario asegurar nuestras fuentes de sobrevivencia. Ha subrayado también la gobernanza global y regional y algo importante en el caso de Colombia, el fomento de la educación ambiental. Ahora tenemos un mensaje de la señora Mami Mizutori, representante especial del Secretario General de Naciones Unidas y jefa de la Oficina de Naciones Unidas del Riesgo de Desastres. Adelante.
Excellency, Dr. Carlos Correa, Minister of Environment of Colombia, Professor Petri Talas, WMO Secretary General, Dr. Mario Cimoli, Acting Executive Secretary of ECLAC, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to take part in launching this important publication, the second report on the state of the climate in Latin America and the Caribbean, 2021. This region is no stranger to disasters. Indeed, it is the second most disaster-prone region in the world. Last year, climatological and meteorological events affected more than 3.7 million people. The region saw the third most active Atlantic hurricane season ever, producing 21 named storms, 7 of which turned into full-blown hurricanes. The region also experienced soaring temperatures, among its warmest years on record. Weather-related and other disasters have revealed how complex risks can be and how interconnected our world is. Global and local challenges travel up and down the same two-way street, and a shock that affects one sector can create profound consequences in another. Not surprisingly, people already at risk or marginalized are often the hardest hit. The COVID-19 pandemic offers a quintessential example of how interconnected risk can create severe upheaval, particularly when intersecting with climate change impact. For example, last year, the fallout from hurricanes Eta and Iota collided with lingering COVID-19 impacts. The result was that 7.7 million people in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua faced high levels of food insecurity. Addressing the complex nature of risk is at the heart of what we do. In May, UNDRR convened the 2022 Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, hosted by the government of Indonesia. Our uniting theme was From Risk to Resilience. Its recommendations were captured in the 7-point Bali Agenda for Resilience. First and foremost is the need for risk management to become a shared responsibility across sectors. Getting on track to achieve the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and the Sustainable Development Goals requires decision makers to adopt comprehensive climate and disaster risk management that puts people first. Doing so requires current data and timely information. Publications like The State of Climate in Latin America and the Caribbean provide an invaluable foundation. Since first published in 2020, the report has been a critical source of science-based information. It also unifies the work of experts across levels and sectors toward long-term multi-sectoral solutions. Among the report's many recommendations is how to make progress on Target G of the Sendai Framework to expand access to multi-hazard early warning systems. This echoes the call by the UN Secretary General that all people everywhere be covered by an early warning system within 5 years. UNDRR thanks WMO and its partners for this valuable report, and we hope to see decision makers immediately act on its findings by prioritizing comprehensive climate and disaster risk management. We have the data. Now it is time to act. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a la señora Mizutori por su mensaje en el que ha subrayado el impacto del cambio climático en América Latina y el Caribe, que produce niveles de inseguridad y que para nosotros, por lo tanto, este informe anual representa ahora una guía para las acciones que deben tomarse de una manera que ella denomina multisectorial. Para cerrar esta introducción tenemos una declaración de la señora Diane Quarles, jefa de la sede subregional de la Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe, en Puerto España, que está con nosotros en línea. Señora Quarles, la palabra es suya.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all distinguished representatives. ECLAC is very pleased to partner with the WMO and the UNDRR in the launch of the 2021 report on the state of the climate in Latin America and the Caribbean. I convey to you the very best wishes of Acting Executive Secretary Mario Cimoli for a successful event today. Let me also thank Assistant Secretary General Jan for the presentation of the report, demonstrating with clarity the very real threat that the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean face as a result of climate change. As we approach the peak of the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season, predicted by NOAA to be an above normal one this year, this meeting could not be more timely or more urgent. There's no question that the countries of our region, particularly the small states of the Caribbean and Central America, are highly vulnerable to climate change impacts, natural disaster, which threaten the economic, social, and environmental sustainability of these countries. We in the Caribbean have still not yet forgotten the devastating impact of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017, Category 5 storms that left a path of destruction across the Caribbean, leaving countries like Dominica with damage and losses equivalent to 226% of GDP. Recovery from which they are still working on. Hurricane Dorian in 2019 caused over 3.4 billion in damage. During 2021, yet another very active season, many countries in the Caribbean experienced major flooding, landslides, foggy tropical storms, Elsa and Breeze. For countries across the Eastern Caribbean, these hydroclimatic impacts were compounded by a volcanic eruption in St. Vincent, causing major dislocation, damage, and loss. And then there were heavy rainfalls and floods across Guyana, Suriname, and regions of Central America, affecting housing, freshwater sources, a range of social welfare issues, population displacement, and of course, increasing food insecurity and post-pandemic health concerns compounding the circumstance. And I could go on. Over the past 30 years, the wider Caribbean has experienced more than 400 such events, most of them hydroclimatic. And as reported by ASG Zhang, persistent warming trends continue to fuel the frequency and ferocity of these hydroclimatic events. Caribbean coastlines, integral to tourism product in these countries, are also subject not only to increased coral bleaching, but also to the annual occurrence of massive sargassum blooms. The widespread deposit of the seaweed on beaches and the wider coastal zones has resulted in significant ecosystem damage and the disruption of economic and social life for numerous Caribbean coastal communities, exacerbating poverty, rendering more fragile, already vulnerable populations. The imperative to continually source or reassign already scarce human, institutional, and financial resources for disaster management has undermined the capacities of the countries of a region to sustainably recover and rebuild better after each event. These multidimensional vulnerabilities and challenges influenced by climate change demand widest consideration of strategic responses for redress, not least through advocacy, solidarity, partnership, and international cooperation. ECLAC therefore unequivocally supports the call made by Secretary General Guterres this year for the pursuit of a new initiative that ensures that all peoples are protected by multi-hazard early warning systems within the next 5 years. Such an ambitious objective to be spearheaded by the WMO will require the active engagement and support of all relevant partners, both within the UN system as well as across the wider international community. We at ECLAC agree that the best way to mitigate and moderate the impact of multidimensional exogenous shocks is by planning for and investing in effective resilience building strategy, by exploring the optimum measures for adaptation, how best to improve forecasting and planning for more effective risk reduction. In this regard, the use of appropriate technologies, including multi-hazard early warning systems and scientific applications, is vital. What is needed is strengthen the technological, institutional, including data management capacities to facilitate the integration of disaster risk information into sustainable development planning. In this effort, working in partnership and solidarity is key, as we in the UN system are demonstrating today. ECLAC is working with the regional intergovernmental bodies to achieve exactly this. CDEMA, the CARICOM Development Partner Group, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. We work with as well to improve capacities in the use of geospatial technologies as required tools for effective disaster risk management. And through this collaboration, we have identified the need for data-driven, regularly updated national vulnerability assessments. Disaster risk reduction and resilience building strategies are cost-effective investments towards preventing future damage and loss. Of course, significant financial investment is essential to the success of these outcomes. The question we must address this morning, therefore, is how best to harness the resources, the commitment, and the goodwill of all partners in strategic and well-coordinated partnership to strengthen national and regional capacity toward the application of effective multi-hazard early warning systems. Partnership and solidarity must be the foundation of our work going forward. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, señora Diane Quarles, por sus palabras en las que ha resaltado el impacto del cambio climático en el PIB de los países, en el PIB de los países de la región, y ha puesto además el acento en algo muy importante, además de la necesidad de sistemas de alerta temprana, la necesidad de solidaridad. De esta manera cerramos la introducción de este evento y pasamos ahora al panel de alto nivel titulado Fortalecimiento de las alianzas para mejorar los sistemas de alerta temprana ante amenazas múltiples en América Latina y el Caribe. Para moderar este primer panel, porque vamos a tener dos paneles, tenemos con nosotros a una personalidad muy apreciada en la comunidad científica latinoamericana e internacional, que estuvo a la cabeza de la Junta de Investigación de la OMM, es actualmente vicepresidenta segunda de la OMM y es también directora del Servicio Meteorológico Nacional de la Argentina. Entonces, creo que debo también informarles que las hojas de vida de los panelistas que van a participar en esta reunión están disponibles en el sitio web de la reunión si quieren ustedes mirar con más detalle la personalidad de cada uno de ellos. Señora Celeste Saulo, tiene usted la palabra.
Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes, muy buenas noches. Sabemos que nos acompañan desde distintos lugares del mundo, a todos y todas. Simplemente voy a tomar unos minutos de este importante evento para, no para repetir lo que ya han mencionado quienes han presentado este reporte y han hecho sus aportes, porque creo que es por sí elocuente lo que hemos visto con este lanzamiento. Lo elocuente es que la acción tiene que ser ya. Este reporte nos obliga como sociedad, como actores, como responsables, como tomadores de decisión, a iniciar la tan mentada acción por el clima. Y a mí me gustaría, para introducir este panel, hacer un pequeño repaso de qué quiere decir la acción para cada uno de los actores y actrices que estamos acá. La acción, este boletín nos dice que la acción necesita datos robustos, datos para poder tomar decisiones. Esos datos los estamos aportando los servicios meteorológicos e hidrológicos. Pero además necesitamos comprender, porque los datos nos dan las evidencias, pero no nos explican las causas. Entonces necesitamos comprender las causas y comprender qué actividades humanas han hecho que hoy midamos las variables meteorológicas que medimos y estos cambios climáticos que registramos. Entonces aparece la academia, aparece la ciencia como un actor concreto que, sumado a los servicios meteorológicos, tiene un rol aquí. Pero luego, además, necesitamos trasladar estos cambios que medimos en las variables meteorológicas, en la temperatura, en la humedad, en el aumento del nivel del mar, en el derretimiento de los glaciares, en fenómenos tales como los percibe nuestra sociedad. Por ejemplo, mayores temperaturas, menores humedades, generan sequías y generan incendios. Y ahí aparecen los impactos más tangibles sobre los sectores. Todo tipo de sectores, sectores productivos, sector privado, sector público, planificación, vivienda, todos se ven afectados por estos fenómenos. Aparecen entonces que sobre lo que hacemos los servicios meteorológicos, lo que hacen la ciencia, se impactan los sectores y aparecen los sectores con sus requerimientos y sus preocupaciones y sus impactos. Pero esa acción a la que nos llama este resultado, este boletín, este reporte del estado del clima, también requiere que comprendamos la vulnerabilidad de cada sistema y que actuemos sobre esas vulnerabilidades de los ecosistemas, de las personas, de las poblaciones. Y entonces entran en juego las comunidades. Y se va complejizando todo a tal punto que obviamente necesitamos mecanismos de coordinación. Y en estos mecanismos de coordinación tienen un rol preponderante los organismos internacionales, entre ellos la Organización Meteorológica Mundial y quienes nos han acompañado en este lanzamiento, Naciones Unidas y otros actores. Las agencias de financiamiento que tienen una hoja de ruta para ayudarnos a transitar esta acción, el sector privado y el sector público, cada uno con su rol. Porque en realidad, si no coordinamos los efectos, las acciones, no va a tener efecto nuestro trabajo. Y como decía, entonces, esta acción nos lleva finalmente a definir y llevar adelante las estrategias de adaptación y mitigación. Por eso, así voy a introducir este panel que se va a concentrar en una de las estrategias de adaptación clave que podemos aportar los servicios meteorológicos e hidrológicos, que son los alertas tempranas. De así y de este modo, entonces voy a dar lugar y cederle la palabra a mi estimado colega de Guyana, el doctor Garvin Cummings, que es el jefe de la Oficina Hidrometeorológica del Servicio Meteorológico de Guyana, que está con nosotros online. Garvin, un gusto tenerte con nosotros. Es tu turno, por favor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Madam Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you wherever you are. All protocols observed. I do have a short presentation. I ask our colleagues to just put it on screen.
It is there.
Please. Garvin, it's okay. We can see.
Yes, thank you very much. So today I want to talk a little bit about the Guyana situation. We've heard a lot on the state of the climate in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I want to talk this morning for a little bit about the state of the multi-hazard early warning system in Guyana. So a brief outline, the next slide, please. Brief outline of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to just briefly talk about the common hazards in Guyana and also speak about the critical gaps in establishing a functional and effective multi-hazard early warning system in Guyana. I'll talk a little bit about maximizing partnerships, and this is all in the Guyana context, and then I close with some recommendations. I rather suspect, though, that as I go through the core of the status of the multi-hazard early warning system in Guyana, it might well reflect some of what is happening across the countries and regional associations 3 and 4. Next slide. So Guyana has really an annual cycle of floods across the country and drought-like conditions, especially in the southern regions of Guyana. The most recent event that we've had of significance occurred last year, actually in 2020.
The presentation is not on the screen.
Okay, Garvin, it's
right,
okay.
Can we continue now?
Yes, it's okay now.
Could we go to the earlier slide?
Por favor, la previa. Gracias.
Right, thank you very much. So, right, in 2021, we had, in fact, severe flooding across Guyana, where all 10 administrative regions were affected. In fact, the president of Guyana did declare a national disaster because all of the regions in the country were, in fact, affected. Almost 30,000 households were impacted. But the difference about this particular event in 2021, the last such event we had was in 2005. The difference last year in 2021 was that all of the 10 administrative regions were in fact affected to some degree. Next slide. So given all that I've said, I think it's important that we examine here then what is the status of multi-hazard early warning system in Guyana. This study was actually completed. There was a gap analysis that was completed under the Cruise Initiative that allows us to really have a better understanding of where we are with respect to the implementation of a end-to-end people-centered multi-hazard early warning system in Guyana. So I'll speak here basically in terms of the, if you can just go up back a little bit, in terms of the 4 pillars for an effective early warning system. You look at the disaster risk knowledge, then detection, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of hazards and possible consequences. What is the status of warning, dissemination, and communication? And then finally, what is the status of preparedness and response capabilities? Next. So each of these themes will be evaluated either from 1 to 3, with 1 being red that the standard has not been met, yellow, the standard has been partially met, or green, or 3, the standard has been fully met. Next slide. So starting with the first pillar, this gap analysis revealed that in Guyana, in fact, there's a lack of DRM, disaster risk management legislation. And really there's no mandate for hazard and vulnerability assessments in the country. There's unclear stakeholders' role within the multi-hazard early warning system framework. The governance framework in place is not consistently implemented, and probably because there isn't legislation to guide the process. There's very limited risk information available and is not consolidated, so you cannot really disaggregate between gender or vulnerable groups or whatever category of groups you may want to put the risk associated with them. And then there is a limited amount of human resource capacity actually in country to conduct hazard and vulnerability assessments. So what is the score on this? So next please. So on this particular pillar, Guyana scored just about partially fulfilling or reaching the standards, just about 2.1 on the scale. Next slide. Pillar number 2, detection, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of hazards. So here again, we saw that there was an inadequacy in terms of the density of the observational network. That really did not even, in terms of what we're talking about on the GBON, did not reach what is required for a basic network. There's weak monitoring and reporting of impacts across the country. I need to say here that Guyana For those of you who may not know, 90% of the population or thereabout lives just along the coastal belt. And that region is also covered by proper forms of communication. However, the other 90% of the country is sparsely populated, where a lot of the indigenous population occupies and inhabits. So there's also, there isn't in country right now a national flood early warning system that is fully operationalized. In 2021, we did in fact have the general framework installed as a system that has to be built. There is limited access to warning and forecasting services, especially again for those vulnerable indigenous communities. And messages are generally prepared and disseminated in a very generalized form, not necessarily being tailored for specific groups of people or stakeholders. And then again, as I said before, the roles are poorly defined. Next slide. So on this particular pillar, Guyana again partially met the standard requirements for a multi-hazard early warning system. Next slide. Pillar number 3, limited warning. The gaps here again, limited early warning communication systems, as I would have described before, not necessarily any way to evaluate whether messages are received and how people are responding to the messages. The alert system is very generic and does not cover all of the possible hazards that we have in Guyana, specifically restricted to rainfall amounts. And there's no clear communication protocols in place. For example, who does what, when, where, what are the responsibilities for the different levels at the community level, the regional level, that is not clearly defined. And there's a need to scale up general public awareness and education on disaster risk. Next, so here we see that Guyana scored even lower. So the standards have not been met with respect to this pillar number 3. Next slide. And the final pillar, preparedness and response capabilities. So we have a very outdated disaster response plan, dated over 10 years now. There are low levels of practice and awareness on the plans themselves. Often the persons who would know about them are the persons who probably would have worked on the plans and is not disseminated downwards. DRM is not currently in our school curriculum. And finally, there's limited public announcements to improve public understanding and awareness on DRM. So next, on this particular pillar, the score again was extremely low. The standard was not met. So having said all of this now, I'd like to move to the next slide to really show that overall, looking at all of the pillars here, Guyana would have scored just about 1.6, which means that the standards are not met in general with respect to having an effective and people-centered multi-hazard early warning system. So next slide. So having said all of that, I think the report there was pretty bleak, but I think that in spite of the lack of the formal system in place, there's a recognition that partnerships and institutional coordination are in fact critical to effective disaster response. So while many of these things are not formalized with the legislation or the necessary institutional structure, the partnerships, there are opportunities for partnerships. There is in fact in existence at the national, regional, and community level arrangements which facilitate coordinated disaster response. There's a National Emergency Operations Center which is activated as required, but coordinating all of the work across the country with respect to disaster risk reduction is a National Disaster Risk Reduction Coordination Platform, which really is a multi-stakeholder body that works together across sectors. The private sector is represented, the public sector, academia as well, and NGO, civil societies on this. Recently, we have a nascent oil and gas industry, and a coordination mechanism has been put in place to facilitate response in that area as well. At the regional level, there are also disaster risk management committees, and then there are community-based risk management committees as well that are activated. Next slide. So communication is recognized as a key element in any disaster response between government and the general population. And in this case, there's strong partnerships between government and the government agencies and the telecommunication companies, allowing for messages to be transmitted to allow for relief and evacuation, etc., and other response operations. Partnerships are also essential to bridging the existing gaps, as I would have described earlier. And the private sector, in fact, plays a very important role in Guyana, even though it is not formalized in terms of disaster response, evacuation, the transport of relief, or even the supply of relief for many communities across the country. The private sector does in fact play a major role in terms of ensuring that the response is effective and efficient. There are a lot of civil society organizations as well as churches that may provide shelters, that may provide counseling. NGOs also provide shelter management services and goods, such as the Guyana Red Cross Society. And there are also lots of local NGOs that provide initial damage assessment and response. And there are also developmental partners that provide key services. For example, in 2021, we had some good partnerships with the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, the Caribbean Meteorological Organization, UNISAT, that allows us to map those areas that were in fact affected by the floods. Next slide. So I'm going to wrap up here now by just making some quick recommendations on what I think can actually help to improve partnerships and to ensure that coordination is in place to allow us to effectively respond and prepare for disasters. So the first one I have there is to really map all the stakeholders, all the potential partners in times of calm. So when there's an event, we know all of our partners, we know what their capacities are, we know how they can contribute to the response activity. It might be also useful to establish cooperation agreements or MOUs with some of these partners to formalize these relationships. And thirdly, training and skill building in periods of calm are also essential to allow us to respond in times of disaster so that we can be at our best as we respond to particular disasters. And finally, I think in our case especially, there's a need to reform the legislative environment to ensure that all parties are on board and roles and responsibilities are clearly defined and we understand what our roles would be well in advance of any particular event. And finally, I think there might be some opportunity as well of finding ways, don't know that I have the answer, but there might be some ways to incentivize some of these relationships to ensure that persons come on board so that we can be effective in our disaster response. Madam Chair, I think that is all I have to say. Thank you very much. That is my time.
Muchas gracias a ti, Garvin, por los puntos, porque nos comentaste los problemas, pero también las alternativas. Con esto, entonces, le voy a dar la palabra al señor Raúl Salazar, que nos acompaña aquí de manera presencial. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. El señor Salazar es el jefe de la Oficina Regional de las Naciones Unidas para la Reducción de Riesgos de Desastres y copreside la Coalición de Naciones Unidas para el Clima y la Resiliencia. Estimado Raúl, tienes la palabra. Te pido por favor que tratemos de ajustarnos a los tiempos para todos los oradores. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias por esta invitación a compartir con ustedes estas reflexiones sobre cómo es la apreciación quizás de lo que se viene haciendo en términos de los sistemas de alerta temprana multiamenaza. Solamente para precisar, por ejemplo, que el marco de Sendai cuando fue adoptado incluyó, como ustedes saben, un componente importante que fueron, aparte de las 4 prioridades del marco, que señalan avanzar en los temas de gobernanza del riesgo, avanzar en los temas de conocimiento del riesgo, la inversión resiliente y la reconstrucción mejor, si se quiere, ese Building Back Better tan sonado. Incluyó además 7 metas que fueron adoptadas por los países, entre las cuales tenemos una meta que es la meta, se denomina la meta G, que se refiere a avanzar en implementar los sistemas de alerta temprana multiamenaza. Y si uno observa cuáles son los componentes de esta meta, porque son, digamos, no son solamente aspiraciones a los que los países se comprometen, sino también con unos compromisos concretos de avance, se adoptaron también por parte de la Asamblea General un conjunto de indicadores. En el caso de los sistemas de alerta temprana tenemos 6 indicadores, 5 de los cuales, los 5 primeros se refieren esencialmente a cómo se está avanzando en implementar estos sistemas, y un sexto indicador que se refiere a la capacidad de evacuar a la población sobre la base de estas alertas. Y si uno observa primero cómo hemos avanzado como región en implementar estos sistemas, lo podemos hacer a través del sistema de monitoreo del marco de Sendai, que también se ha aprobado, a través del cual los países reportan cuáles son sus avances. Y uno ve que en nuestra región, actualmente solamente 17 de los 35 países de la región reportan tener por lo menos estar en proceso de reportar sobre estos avances, y solamente 7 de los 35 países reportan haber implementado estos sistemas de alerta temprana multiamenaza, por lo menos en el año 2021. Entonces, lo que se estaba planteando al inicio en este reporte que se ha lanzado hoy es bastante claro, en el sentido de que existen aún brechas importantes en avanzar, en implementar estos sistemas en nuestra región, y lo cual llama a una primera reflexión de la necesidad de continuar justamente con este fortalecimiento de las capacidades de los países para contar con estos sistemas, que no solamente implementarlos, sino también permitan hacer el monitoreo de cómo se vienen implementando y avanzando respecto a esta meta que fue asumida. Una segunda reflexión sobre, digamos, la primera sobre cómo estamos, la segunda quizás sobre cuáles son los principales retos que podemos enfrentar respecto a esta, y por qué no estamos avanzando como quisiésemos, por qué encontramos estas brechas. Nosotros vemos que en el caso de la región, como en todo el mundo, y lo decía también Mami Bisutori en sus palabras, estamos enfrentando un contexto de riesgos cada vez más complejo, cada vez más interconectado, y eso lo hemos visto claramente en el caso del COVID-19, donde coexiste una serie de riesgos no solamente de origen climático, sino también de origen biológico, aquellos que son inducidos por el ser humano y aquellos propios, si se quiere, también geológicos, como en esta región ha sucedido también en algunas islas del Caribe. Esto nos lleva también a hacer una aproximación que ha sido, como se ha dado las cosas, es una aproximación muy sectorizada, es decir, por silos, donde esta información no fluye, donde la aproximación hacia las amenazas suele ser de un solo sector y solamente sobre un solo tipo de amenazas, y lo que vemos es que inclusive los sistemas de gobernanza del riesgo están diseñados para enfrentar amenazas esencialmente de origen natural, pero no necesariamente aquellas que están vinculadas o que vienen ocurriendo de manera simultánea o muchas veces en cascada. Entonces, los sistemas de alerta multiamenaza llaman a una primera aproximación sistémica del riesgo, a un abordaje de estos riesgos de manera intersectorial, no solamente entre ministerios de un gobierno, sino entre los distintos niveles de gobierno, para poder ser efectivos. Los distintos mandatos de las agencias, por ejemplo, responden a directivas específicas en cada sector, y esto dificulta este trabajo coordinado que mencionaba también Diane Quarles en su presentación. Y esto también llama a una primera acción, que es justamente cómo abordamos la preparación de los planes y estrategias nacionales para la reducción de riesgo de desastres, primero que integren estos distintos aspectos de los riesgos que llaman una reflexión intersectorial, cómo se refleja esto en una legislación donde se define claramente cuáles son los mecanismos de coordinación, pero también cuáles son los distintos roles de los actores. Esto lo vimos en la presentación de Guyana, cuando señalaba que una de las principales limitaciones son, entre ellas, la definición de roles y actores, y superar también los aspectos presupuestales, es decir, cuánto se asigna. No solamente en muchos de nuestros países vemos que los sistemas de alerta multiamenaza ahora son basados en proyectos, no necesariamente financiados de manera recurrente o consistente como parte de presupuestos públicos, y esto tiene que ver con la legislación. Existen, sin embargo, experiencias importantes, se han mencionado varias. Trinidad y Tobago, la vimos recientemente, tiene un sistema en donde este tipo de reflexiones se da de manera intersectorial, entre ellos, por ejemplo, los de alerta temprana. Y yendo quizás al último punto sobre este sistema, esta coalición sobre temas específicos de Naciones Unidas que reúne a un conjunto de agencias del sistema que está orientado esencialmente a proveer una visión justamente multisectorial donde las capacidades de las distintas agencias de Naciones Unidas participan prácticamente cada una de las, son 14 organizaciones que participan en esta coalición de resiliencia y cambio climático, donde se abordan los aspectos desde seguridad alimentaria, no solamente también climáticos, interviene la OMM ahí, los aspectos de impacto sobre la niñez, desplazamiento, los aspectos también de clima propiamente, y esto se busca dar al nivel de una asesoría a los equipos país de Naciones Unidas con esta visión tan general. Se han producido una serie de productos que están a disposición de los equipos para que faciliten en su implementación y en su acuerdo a nivel de país este tipo de enfoques.
Muchas gracias, Raúl, por tus contribuciones, por tu discusión y por tus aportes. Me gustaría entonces ahora pasarle la palabra a la señora doctora Nicole Greenwich. Ella es especialista en gestión de riesgos de desastres de la Agencia de Gestión de Emergencia de Desastres en el Caribe y nos acompaña online. Nicole, tienes la palabra. Recuerda, por favor, mantener el tiempo que es de 5 minutos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Te escuchamos. We can hear you. Hi, Nicole.
Okay, excellent. I would like to share my screen.
Please go ahead.
I'm not allowed.
Can you share screen?
Yes, I can now. Are you seeing the presentation on the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Excellent. So, hello to you, whatever time it is in the world, all protocols being established. I'm happy to be here today to present to you on behalf of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. Are you seeing my screen in full view? Full presentation mode?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So SEDEMA is made up of 20 participating states. You can see we have the Bahamas in the north, and coming all the way down, we have Suriname, and then right across we have Belize, and then the Eastern Caribbean chain. Guyana is also a participating state of SEDEMA, and I will make some connections between my presentation and the presentation given by Mr. Cummins. I'm going to speak to SEDEMA initiatives that are related to multi-hazard early warning systems. We have a number of those initiatives, and our work is really buttressed within the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy 2014 to 2024. And on the priority area 4, which speaks to community resilience, you will see that there is a priority outcome area related to community early warning systems being integrated, improved, and expanded. Our work, which is the blueprint here on comprehensive disaster management, is aligned to the Sendai framework. What has SEDEMA been doing? Well, we've been focusing on developing the appropriate guidance documents to aid our participating states. So we have developed the model multi-hazard early warning systems policy and early warning systems toolkit. Through the use of these tools, we are seeking to build up the enabling environment in our participating states. We've also taken on work of implementing what we call the 6-step process for developing evidence-based roadmaps in participating states, whereby we establish a supporting structure or arrangement that would provide oversight to the work. Then there's the application of the multi-hazard early warnings checklist, which Mr. Cummings would have shared. We prepare then the gap analysis report. That is then verified. The roadmap is prepared as part of a workshop, and then the next step is the implementation of what is in the roadmap. We are able to do this work only through the support of our partners, including the United Nations Development Program, work with the World Bank recently through the Cruise Project to help us to reach more of our participating states with this work. So on our website, you will see we have an early warning systems toolkit that will provide the tools and guidance on each of the pillars of multi-hazard early warning systems. The policy, I've just shared it here, but that is built out based on the early warning systems pillars, the enabling environment being key to that, and having the guiding principles in place. So this is just a look at the checklist, and Mr. Cummings did a very good job explaining how that was applied in the Guyana context. We had applied prior to 2021 in Guyana. We had applied it in 2018 in other participating states of SIGMA, also in collaboration with other partners. In 2021, we did it in Guyana. We applied that in Guyana, Barbados, and also in another participating state. I will just highlight there, Trinidad and Tobago. We were able then to make improvements to the checklist in 2021 version, where we now have this 1, 2, 3 attainment level. So we prepared a regional summary worksheet that we're able to look at our countries, 7 of them that would have applied the checklist, and be able then to understand where are the trends in our participating states, and to take this to the other participating states to see if they can verify that this is similar in their situation as well. So these are the gap analysis reports that we prepared 3 in 2021, and then the roadmaps that came out for those 3 countries that I mentioned. So what were the findings? We recognize that we have issues with having risk information being available in our states, having a data sharing protocols and repositories. The normative frameworks, we have gaps in that area. And then these 4 other areas where we have shortfalls in tests and exercises. The community level is an engagement across the pillars is limited. Consideration, the needs of the vulnerable, respect for gender, and so on. We have gaps in these areas. There's sporadic testing, a perpetual lack of awareness of respective roles and responsibilities, as came out in the case of Guyana, but across the board, this is also the case. And there are concerns around the alert system, including redundancy in the systems, maintaining the communication channels, and disseminating to reach the last mile. Finally, just to highlight on the human resource constraints, there's a lot of overwork due to limited staffing and the need for technical capacity and resources to effectively undertake duties. Across the board, though, sustainable funding is lamented in all our participating states, and the limitations in the technical capacity is a perpetual challenge. So therefore, then, what are the priorities that we have seen emerging from these checklists? Well, of course, the need to have the hazard vulnerability and state and analysis. The need to update and enact legislation to guide, and also standard operating procedures. SDEMA is also, with the help of the Cruise Project, we're now working on SOPs between the disaster management offices and the Met offices. But we need to do more in this area. There's also the technical training to be done, increasing the frequency of our communication campaigns, having better communication whereby we have better reach and target, and we reach our target audiences. And also the fact that we need to have standardized methodologies, data sharing protocols, and increased tests and exercises. As you can see, these are tied to the gaps that I have identified. So just very quickly to wrap up then on recommendations and way forward from a regional perspective. We do have in the report a lot more detailed recommendations also for the national level. But given the focus for today in terms of promoting coordination and integration of efforts related to multi-hazard early warning systems, currently for the region, under the cruise, there's the strategic roadmap for advancing multi-hazard early warning systems. What we would like to see there is that we revisit some of the design assumptions there to determine whether the lack of minimum threshold foundation, that is the EWS architecture, where countries don't have legislation, they don't have policies, appropriate policies in place, and then they don't have that data that would be available, that we need to revisit those key assumptions and try and address those causes. Some of them take longer than others to address, but we really need to get to the root and address those. So that we can identify the critical path and priority activities at the national level and see how we support those at the regional level. We do have a number of states. Like I said, this work was done in 7 countries, but we have 20 participating states, and we have shortfalls in terms of how are we going to finance that work in the other participating states where we need to have the evidence base in place. Multiple agencies and donors are actively engaging and supporting improvements in the multi-hazard early warning systems work. And we also have a regional early warning systems consortium, but we need to coordinate better. And so as it relates to this regional early warning systems, which has the role of pursuing the articulation of standards, they have a role in providing and coordinating EWS in the region. This consortium, we have had challenges in convening it due to lack of staffing challenge, the limited human resources to keep it pushing along. But we were able to establish this group that is SEDIMA, and it is made up of those key partners in early warning systems in the region. And of course, we can improve in terms of who is engaged. But we need, as a group, to break the barriers. There's certainly a role for the group in breaking the barriers to data flows within and between countries and articulating regional standards so that we can streamline systems, approaches, and interoperability. Finally, then, as it relates to sustainable financing, we can leverage the strategic roadmap to give us a coherent approach to that. We can also ensure that we have used the national and regional roadmaps as a mechanism for attracting investment, transparency, and accountability in the evolution of MUSE. Creating a pooled regional fund is another suggestion, and also to ensure that our national disaster offices, in cooperation with diverse partners, develop those private-public partnerships. So I thank you for listening, and I'm happy if there's any questions at the appropriate time. Over.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Gracias. Desafortunadamente estamos con muy poco tiempo para preguntas. Te agradecemos por contar la experiencia de trabajo regional en el Caribe y le voy a pasar la palabra a la señora Ana María Bogdanova. Ella es especialista en gestión de riesgos de catástrofes y trabaja en el Banco Mundial. Querida Ana María, un gusto tenerte con nosotras. Tienes la palabra, por favor. Te pido que te ajustes a los 5 minutos. Gracias, Ana.
Gracias, Celeste. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank WMO and the colleagues for organizing this discussion and launching the report that provides very rich evidence for the need for more actions. And I understand we're way behind those schedules, so it's not easy to be the last one to talk because a lot of points have been made by now, so use my intervention as a summary in a way. So maybe just also a disclaimer that my work is mostly focused on the Caribbean region and Central America, so my comments would mostly be applicable to these areas. However, I believe that the lessons learned there are very much applicable across the region. So speaking of challenges, a lot has been said already, but I'd like to just maybe reiterate that when we talk about multi-hazard early warning services and systems, we should look at it in the regional and national context. So we're talking about the region that is highly vulnerable to increasing climate vulnerability and extremes due to climate change. We heard from the message of Secretary General that we have heat extremes and changing precipitation patterns, and agricultural productivity is impacted, and hydrological regimes are changing. So you have from shrinking glaciers to increasing sea level rise that could generate millions and hundreds of millions of losses in pretty much every area of the region. We also dealing with the changing pattern of frequency and intensity of events. So the hurricane season of 2020 brought 2 hurricanes that were hitting Central America in less than 2 weeks, causing tens of billions of dollars of damage. 2021 was the 3rd most active hurricane season. Now we're looking at above normal intensity. Again, the climate change is already having a major impact on the growth in Latin American Caribbean region. So on average, about 1.7% of GDP is lost each year due to climate change related disasters. And several countries are experiencing deeper, longer droughts and intensified storms and floods, and are disrupting economies, activities, and affecting livelihoods. So when we are in the context when we have struggling economies, growing inequality, increasing fiscal constraints, all this will have a direct impact on the multi-hazard early warning systems and vice versa. So I think it's important to always have this on the radar and to have this context in mind when we talk about challenges and effectiveness of multi-hazard early warning systems. We say that the systems should be fit for purpose, they should be fit for actions, but they also have to be fit for national budgets. So we have to keep this in mind, and we may expect that climate change will lead up to 300% increase in extreme poverty in Latin America by 2030. These people are in many ways on the front line, that we need to keep this in mind when we talk about their lives and how the effective and inclusive multi-hazard early warning services looks like. So this is way much more than the hydrometeor networks question. And when we say effective multi-hazard early warning services, and it means very often a sustainable early warning service. So sustainability is another key concept that we're constantly referring to, but we need to constantly break it down to smaller pieces to better understand what we mean when we say sustainable. So it's sustainability of the network, hardware, maintenance. On the other hand, it's sustainability of training and education of staff, funding and cost, communication. Very often it's sustainability of motivation of people in communities and those who liaise with communities. And if we look for the opportunities, they very often come from the challenges. So maybe just to summarize that, and I heard it throughout the presentations of my colleagues, strong political commitments, which would then support a stronger policy and regulatory environment. Legislative support for harmonized approach is essential to streamline integrity in interagency data sharing and develop crucial applications and modeling for example, for IDF transition. Policy and legislative support are crucial for expansion to private sector collaboration along with the entire early warning service value chain. We very often we need to kind of like understand what are the regional and national institutions and what are their capacities. So regional national leadership is crucial for the successful performance of the multi-hazard early warning services, which will require collaboration and resourcing at international, regional, and national levels. Capacity building. Capacity building has become kind of like a catch-all phrase that is used almost automatically every time we talk about multi-stakeholder systems. Capacity building underpins institutional development and the human resources, and it requires a constant support and injection. I think just maybe to add that the private sector and the academia are have to be integrated in the whole concept of multi-hazard early warning system, and when it's built and when it's become effective and when it's assessed. I probably don't have to advocate for partnerships and make any more arguments in favor. Just to add that for the Cruise Caribbean project, it was in general a product of the partnership between the WMO, UNDR, and the bank. And we found that it's very important to transform the partnership from overall support and information sharing to actual collaboration. So it's critical to find these 2-3 areas where you're really going to join the efforts and make a difference. It doesn't have to be super grandiose. It can be something very practical and which may look like small scale, but in fact it brings a lot of value. And I think like Cruise Caribbean project was a good example because we were partnering with CDIMA for early warning checklists for several countries. We're constantly working hand in hand with CMO headquarters and CMH for several pilots, and partnering with other programs like Weather Ready Nations program to support the transition to the impact-based forecasting. So I'm wrapping up, maybe just 2 last comments, saying that the case for the need for the multi-hazard early warning system has been made. So next is to help each other and to help countries to develop multi-hazard systems that work, that trigger actions, to understand why people are taking actions or why they're not taking actions, and how we can change this. How do we link the effectiveness of multi-hazard early warning systems with building back better, for example, and more. So it is a transition to the action side, to the impact side, and I think that gives us a lot of tasks, and a lot of our to-do list is growing. I'm wrapping up. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Ana María. Bueno, este aplauso también fue para Nicole, que no hicimos un aplauso para ella, y un aplauso también para todos quienes contribuyeron a este panel. Y le voy a ceder la palabra entonces a nuestro maestro de ceremonias para continuar con la actividad, dado que estamos un poquito atrasados en la agenda. Así que, por favor, Andrés, es tu turno.
Muchas gracias, Celeste. Agradecemos a la moderadora, al orador principal y a los panelistas de este primer segmento. Y ahora vamos a pasar a la segunda parte. Tenemos un segundo y último panel. Tenemos el privilegio de contar con la doctora Arlene Lane, directora coordinadora de la Organización Meteorológica del Caribe, que cumplirá la función de moderadora de este segundo segmento en línea desde Trinidad y Tobago. Entonces, le cedo la palabra a la señora Lane. Señora Lane, adelante, por favor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, everyone. With all protocols being observed, I greet you on behalf of the 16 member states of the Caribbean Meteorological Organization, which extends from Belize in the west to Guyana in the east. Thank you for inviting me to chair this high-level panel to address the critical role of national meteorological and hydrological services and the research community in strengthening multi-hazard early warning systems in our region. The panel will focus on ensuring that innovations in science are transitioned to operations and services for early warning systems, and for the national meteorological and hydrological services to in turn influence and inspire researchers to conduct studies in their priority areas of need. The WMO Research Board's concept notes on science for services and innovations in regions highlight some of the best practices in how operational and research communities can work together, with Latin America and the Caribbean being among those who contributed to those concept notes, and also the role of all of these groups working together with the WMO research programs that are being conducted with activities across the globe. These researched operations and operations to research, dialogues, collaborations, they rely on data sharing and a multidisciplinary research approach, as well as training within MET and hydromet services to become more research oriented. All of these take considerable efforts to be successful. Our panel of speakers will be, whom I'll be introducing shortly, will provide some of those examples to us for our region. I'd like to introduce Dr. Jose Marengo, Research and Development Director of Semaden, I apologize, and lead author of the WMO Climate Report for Latin America and the Caribbean 2021. Dr. Marengo, I give you the floor.
Okay, well, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. ¿Será que podría colocarla? Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación. Lo que quisiera presentar ahora es un poco la experiencia que tenemos en Brasil en relación a los Multi-Hazard Early Warning Systems. El centro que trabajo es el Centro Nacional de Monitoreo y Alerta de Desastres Naturales del Gobierno Federal, y los desastres naturales que monitoramos y hacemos predicciones son básicamente de origen hidrometeorológico, o sea, mucha agua que puede dar lugar a inundaciones, inundaciones fuertes, el caso también de deslizamientos de tierra y también la parte de sequía, ¿no? Nosotros no hacemos previsión de tiempo, usamos la previsión de tiempo como uno de los ingredientes, lo que le llaman el hazard, para poder emitir el riesgo de desastres. Entonces, alerta y riesgo de desastres. Entonces, simplemente para colocar que el CEMADEN fue creado en 2011, después de un desastre que pasó en la región serrana de Río de Janeiro, donde murieron más de 1000 personas, ¿no? Entonces, ahí se vio a través del gobierno federal que una alerta de desastres no es una alerta meteorológico, porque puede haber una alerta meteorológico en una región donde llueve mucho, pero no hay personas, ¿no? Entonces, pero puede haber también desastres asociados a mucha lluvia donde hay una alta concentración de población, como es el caso de la región este de Brasil, desde el nordeste hasta el sur. Entonces, las atribuciones del CEMADEN, cuando fue creado, no se pensó mucho en lo que sería un Multi-Hazard Early Warning System. Era simplemente para responder a la necesidad de que tenemos que tomar acción para evitar que personas continúen muriendo todo el año, tanto en verano como en invierno. Y ahí vino la creación en 2011, y después con el protocolo de Sendai en 2015 ya más o menos se ajustó un poco para poderlo encajar dentro del sistema de MUSE. ¿No? Entonces, en Brasil, la gobernancia de desastres naturales, ¿no? Entonces, por ejemplo, colocamos CEMADEN como un centro del gobierno federal, un centro de investigación aplicada y de operación, donde trabaja con reducción de riesgo de desastres. Entonces, el CEMADEN recopila todas las informaciones de otros centros, tanto el INEMET, que es nuestro National Meteorological and Hydrological Center, los centros estatales de meteorología, el sector privado también. Después tenemos informaciones, lo que se refiere a la parte de población, capacidad de renta y todo eso que más o menos determina vulnerabilidad. El Servicio Geológico de Brasil, que nos ayuda un poco a determinar la exposición de la población. La Agencia Nacional de Aguas y también la comunidad misma, o sea, la participación de la población. Y es claro, junto con el sector académico se realizan investigaciones tanto a nivel nacional e internacional. Entonces, después de todo eso, juntando todas esas informaciones, el CEMADEN elabora los alertas a través de un equipo de personas que incluye meteorólogos, hidrólogos, geógrafos, especialistas en comunicación, especialistas en desastres naturales, o sea, dimensiones humanas. Se pasa eso para el SENAT, que es el Centro Nacional de Desastres, y el SENAT lo pasa para la Defensa Civil. Entonces, así que se emite una alerta, el CEMADEN lo repasa a través del SENAT para la Defensa Civil. ¿Y quién que toma las acciones para evacuar a las personas? O sea, toda la parte que sería el manejo del riesgo sería la Defensa Civil. O sea, el CEMADEN no emite las alertas a la población, es a través de la Defensa Civil. Y ahí, claro, Defensa Civil toma todas las acciones de contingencia, de trabajo y todas las acciones de recuperación. Aquí le coloco dos ejemplos que tuvimos. Lluvias muy intensas en la última semana de diciembre de 2021 entre los estados de Bahía y Minas Gerais. Justamente en esa semana llovió casi más de 200, 300 milímetros mayor que lo normal, ¿no? Y es claro, todo eso generó un gran riesgo de inundaciones intensas, rápidas, y esas alertas fueron repasadas para la población. O sea, no fue repasada la previsión de tiempo, porque los centros meteorológicos ya habían hecho la previsión de tiempo. Lo que fue repasada a través de la información fue la alerta de desastre de ocurrencia, de riesgo de desastre de ocurrencia de inundaciones fuertes, ¿no? Y eso básicamente llevó a que el número de personas que murió fue relativamente bajo, fueron 26. Entonces ahí tenemos que ver que justamente esa consideración de monitoreo y alerta ayudó bastante a la población y a reducir al máximo el número de vidas posibles, ¿no? Eso fue el año pasado. Ahora recientemente, y eso también es de las alertas emitidas. El primer mapa muestra las alertas de riesgo hidrológico en diciembre y el segundo mapa fueron las ocurrencias, o sea, lo que pasó. Y ahí no sé si pueden ver ese mapa con puntos rojos, es básicamente la lluvia acumulada en la última semana, 23 a 27. Y ahí en la figura abajo las líneas representan las ocurrencias y las barras representan las alertas. Entonces, básicamente, lo que nosotros, bueno, no sé si apuntarlo dónde, pero lo que nosotros tenemos ahí es el alerta emitido y 2 días después el fenómeno pasó, o sea, fue alertado en cierta forma. Ahora, Otro caso donde también pasó, más la situación no fue tan favorable, fue en el estado de Recife. La región metropolitana de Recife, una población de casi 1.600.000 personas. Y en mayo, en 25 y 28 de mayo, como consecuencia de ondas del este, los institutos meteorológicos hicieron previsión de lluvia, solo que llovió más de lo previsto. Las alertas fueron emitidas, ahí ustedes pueden ver el mapa abajo, el primer mapa de la región metropolitana de Recife, donde aparecen esas manchas rojas y marrones, son las áreas vulnerables, o sea, las áreas que fueron identificadas juntamente con los datos del Servicio Geológico y juntamente también con los datos del Instituto Brasileño de Geografía y Estadística, datos de censo. O sea, áreas donde hay una alta concentración humana, áreas donde las casas están básicamente pegadas una a otra y donde realmente pasaron los desastres. Y ahí ustedes ven las otras figuras también. Justamente llovió más en aquellas áreas donde están los círculos que son las áreas vulnerables. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que pasó? Justamente, aún con las alertas emitidas, el número de muertos fue alto, 133. Y ahí nos dimos cuenta de que realmente todavía falta, en cierta forma, ese entrenamiento de la población y los gobiernos, particularmente gobiernos de Estado, para poder tener esa percepción de que cuando se emite una alerta, aunque la alerta pueda no estar cierto, por lo menos hay que tomar acciones necesarias, ¿no? Entonces, espera ahí. Bueno, había un... ¿Está atrás? No, que estaba avanzando. Bueno, había un slide básicamente al final. Disculpen, voy a tener que darle la espalda. Bueno, entonces colocamos algunas preguntas importantes, ¿no? Por ejemplo, el riesgo de que los eventos extremos están aumentando y todo eso. Y ahí que viene, por ejemplo, nosotros tenemos que pensar en investigar, conocer el riesgo, cuantificar el riesgo, monitorar aquel riesgo justamente para la población y los gobiernos estar preparados, ¿no? Particularmente las personas viviendo en áreas de riesgo, disculpe. Puede, algunos casos, por ejemplo, el caso que se toqué aquí, el caso de Minas Gerais, justamente cuando se hizo la predicción del hazard, o sea, la predicción de lluvia, también se emitió la predicción de las alertas considerando eventos o considerando informaciones que no son meteorológicas, que son básicamente descensos topográficas de población. O sea, para poder entender un riesgo de desastre, no es suficiente la meteorología, es conocimiento de vulnerabilidad de la población de la área donde va a caer la lluvia, ¿no? En el último caso, por ejemplo, los servicios meteorológicos y en este caso MIUS, o sea, en caso de Brasil y otros, trabajamos en conjunto, ¿no? Porque juntamente con la información tenemos que tener otros datos. Entonces, la idea de apoyar los servicios meteorológicos e hidrológicos y también la idea de interactuar tanto en el sector operacional de los servicios estatales y federales, así como también con el gobierno federal y con los centros que trabajan con predicción y alertas es intenso. Hay mucha investigación y también hay, claro, mucho dinero, ¿no? Semaden tiene su propia red que la juntamos con la red de observación de los otros y ahí podemos hacer un monitoreo más intenso de las áreas particularmente afectadas. Semaden monitorea 1.038 municipios que son los más vulnerables a desastres y Brasil tiene 5.000 y tantos municipios, ¿no? Bueno, con eso quería darles una visión un poco general del centro que trabajo. No es haciendo propaganda al centro, más a un Multi-Hazard Early Warning System, que no nació para hacer eso, más que está evoluyendo para eso. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marengo. It's good to see this example of all of these groups working together across disciplines in order to ensure a successful multi-hazard early warning system. I would like to now introduce our next panelist, that is Engineer Yolanda Gonzalez, Director of IDAIAM and President of Regional Association 3. Ms. Gonzalez, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Muy buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches para todos quienes se encuentran de manera presencial y virtual y también para quienes más adelante nos estén escuchando en la reproducción de este gran encuentro. Como presidenta de la Asociación Regional AR3 Suramérica, queremos traer acá a conocimiento de todos ustedes nuestras necesidades de investigación. La investigación para Suramérica orientada al sistema clima-tierra, como nos lo han presentado tanto el profesor Talas y el doctor Weyen. Estas necesidades de investigación en Suramérica orientadas a la interacción del clima, la tierra, los ecosistemas y la sociedad en nuestro componente andino, amazónico, costero, marino, insular, hidrológico, los sistemas transfronterizos, los riesgos, el género y las comunidades, las políticas de datos y el dato como es el ladrillo básico de la información climatológica, meteorológica mundial e hidrológica. A través de nuestros centros de formación de la OMM, en alianzas también con la CIMED, la academia pública y privada, con acuerdos bipartitos, tripartitos, en los cuales a través de estos podamos implementar los planes de la región en línea con el plan estratégico de la OMM. Sabemos y somos conscientes del relevo generacional de nuestros servicios hidrológicos meteorológicos nacionales, no solo en la AR3, sino en gran parte del planeta. Es apremiante la información, el conocimiento y la investigación. También muy de la mano de la tecnología, la aplicación integral de nuevas tecnologías que nos han llegado a renovarnos, a informarnos y a darnos otro salto. El desarrollo de software o de plataformas que nos permitan tener como base iniciativas como CISA en el tema de sequías. Para nosotros en la AR3 es necesario y apremiante ahondar en la investigación de las sequías y también de los estudios del comportamiento del clima en la alta montaña y en la Amazonia. Proyectos como en Andes Brava, en Andes Plus también. También la comunicación con la comunidad y la sociedad. Para esto se está contemplando en la AR3 el fortalecimiento del grupo de expertos con esas alianzas de la academia en torno a la investigación del cambio climático, la variabilidad climática, los eventos extremos y, como lo hemos podido ver hoy, las olas de calor u olas frías en nuestros planes regionales de la OMM. También queremos compartir con ustedes una gran noticia que hemos venido desarrollando, motivadas por Mr. Weyen, en torno al tema de alertas tempranas, acción temprana. Una iniciativa desde la AR3, motivada también por la OMM Ginebra, también con todos los PRs y con toda esta instancia que hemos escuchado en el día de hoy de las Naciones Unidas, en la creación de un centro de alertas tempranas para Suramérica o un sistema de alertas tempranas para Suramérica. Esta iniciativa única en este momento para el planeta, dado que tenemos instancias, como lo citaban anteriormente, de proyectos de alertas tempranas, ¿no? De sistemas o de software de alertas tempranas o experiencias tan valiosas como nos han mostrado en el día de hoy, y esa necesidad apremiante y la oportunidad única que tenemos en este momento de Suramérica de crear este sistema de alertas tempranas de Suramérica en torno a todas las amenazas y alertas hidrológicas, meteorológicas y ambientales que tenemos. Incendios forestales, inundaciones, crecientes súbitas, olas de calor, olas de frío. También tenemos nuestro componente costero, erosión costera, los sistemas que nos afectan en territorio insular también, eventos extremos de precipitaciones y en las ciudades, nuevos retos en calidad del aire, el tema del componente ambiental y de la calidad del aire en las zonas urbanas. También queremos compartir que esta iniciativa cuenta con la motivación de los PRs y por supuesto con experiencias que ya hemos tenido en varios países de Sudamérica, y queríamos compartir estas iniciativas que muy seguramente estaremos presentando muy pronto en escenarios que nos permitan favorecer la financiación y la gestión del mismo. La visión de Suramérica es un trabajo integrado, conjunto con nuestros 5 grupos de trabajo, con los presidentes, vicepresidentes, a quienes agradezco y felicito por todo su trabajo permanente, a la Oficina Regional de las Américas y agradecemos a la OMM también por este trabajo conjunto que hemos venido desarrollando en la AR3. Y como lo decía el señor ministro de Ambiente de Colombia, Carlos Correa, alerta temprana, acción temprana. Creo que de este encuentro y de este momento nace ese sistema de alertas tempranas para Sudamérica que entre todos estaremos construyendo, fortaleciendo y sosteniendo, ¿no?, esa sostenibilidad permanente de este sistema. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonzalez, for those words and your leadership of Regional Association 3. I would like now to pass the floor on to Mr. Evan Thompson, who is the Director of the Jamaican Meteorological Service, as well as the President of Regional Association 4.
Thank you very much, Arlene, and a very good day to all of you who are in the room and those who are joining us on the online virtual platform. You know, I'm coming in late to bat here. We're almost at the end of our forum, but you know, Jamaicans are known to be very fast, so I think I will have no problems this morning. We will be able to get through my slides in a very short period of time. But I wanted to look back at the fact that Regional Association 4, in our 18th session in 2021, we took a number of decisions, and some of these were expressed in the vision of the RA4 with respect to research. So I do want to inform you about the research priorities that we do have in our region. It was said earlier that multi-hazard early warning systems are essential for effective adaptation to weather and climate extremes. But it's important to recognize that research is important for the development of these multi-hazard early warning systems. First of all, to identify what the problems are that we want to address. And then, of course, as we address those problems, to make sure that we have the ideal solutions for the problems. So in our decisions, we decided that we would promote the convergence and integration between the WMO research programs of interest to our region within and outside of the WMO community. There were a number of other decisions having to do, of course, with disaster risk reduction and multi-hazard early warning systems, but we also decided to engage with the research board of the WMO to coordinate the execution of the WMO research programs according to the priorities that were established in our regional association. We also decided to develop a roadmap that would coordinate, or that is coordinated by the focal point on research and modeling, to address these research priorities within the active participation of WMO-sponsored programs, universities, research entities, and scientific partner organizations. We had a number of research priorities, and there were also a number of activities that were identified. So I just want to point to a few of these in my presentation. First of all, we decided our research priority was to coordinate or to contribute to the development of high-resolution, sub-seasonal, and seasonal numerical weather prediction models implemented in the Central America region and based on the outputs of the Global Forecasting System, the GFS. Under the topic of climate variability and change, climate extremes, compound events, and climate change-related issues, including impacts on agriculture, health, wildfires, water, etc. Those were also considered priority activities to be undertaken. Under hydrology, we thought about the coastal and inland flooding, improving quantitative precipitation estimation. Also in marine areas, the development of high-resolution probabilistic coastal inundation modeling guidance and products. There were also priorities identified concerning atmospheric composition, but also we looked at some specific activities that we would be engaging going forward. And included in those are the enhancing of efforts to obtain funding, which is critical to research and building of partnerships with research institutions. Also a focus on transitioning scientific knowledge to operations and services. Then we also decided that there was the important activity of embracing and empowering decision makers through co-design and the incorporation of social science research. So that is something that we thought was very important that we needed to move forward on. The RA4 and of course our focal point for research and modeling also looked at strengthening of the science research relationship and the multi-hazard early warning systems. So under this, we have been identifying scientists within our RA4 who can support operational activities following the WMO research to services approach and serve to WMO research working groups. Also, our focal point is fostering activities and events that are relevant to RA4 research priorities and the multi-hazard early warning system, such as the workshops on lightning research, applications, and safety awareness, quite often overlooked, but we recognize it as very important. Also, knowledge action network on emergent risks and extreme events. So that's basically it. I told you I would be quick. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson, for highlighting the research priorities of RA4 and how some of these priorities are being implemented. And the linkage, of course, with the WMO Research Board and the WMO Research Programs and those long-term goals that those projects are fulfilling. I would like to now introduce our speaker, Dr. Jorge Tamayo, who is the coordinator for the Ibero-American Meteorological Cooperation Program. Dr. Tamayo, you have the floor, please.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches a quienes nos escuchan desde otras longitudes del planeta. Y para mí, en primer lugar, agradecer a la organización el haberme invitado en representación de la CIMET. Para los que no lo conozcan, la CIMET es la Conferencia de Directores de los Servicios Meteorológicos e Hidrológicos Iberoamericanos, es decir, es la red de meteorología que engloba a todos los directores de la comunidad iberoamericana, o sea, de los 19 países americanos más los 3 países de la península ibérica. Esta red constituye un foro de colaboración, de discusión entre los distintos directores para plantear actividades que permitan cumplir los objetivos de los servicios meteorológicos, que es prestación de servicios a la sociedad, y evidentemente entre esos objetivos es prioritario todo aquello que tiene que ver con los sistemas de alerta temprana. Ya se ha comentado varias veces que los sistemas de alerta temprana, la información de base, por lo menos en lo que tiene que ver con fenómenos hidrometeorológicos, tiene que ver mucho con la información que suministran los servicios meteorológicos y también en nuevos retos que están ocurriendo pues, relacionados con ya fenómenos, podríamos decir, más atmosféricos, como todos aquellos que tienen que ver con calidad del aire. Es decir, que tenemos un reto los servicios meteorológicos para poder prestar estos servicios a nuestras sociedades. Evidentemente con una serie de problemas. No vamos a entrar ahora a hablar de toda la casuística que hay con respecto a las capacidades de los servicios meteorológicos, pero sí que hay un elemento fundamental, creo que es clave, que es el disponer de herramientas que nos permitan prestar estos servicios. Y ahí es donde entraría muy de lleno la colaboración con la comunidad investigadora, que apoyen a los servicios meteorológicos, que apoyen a estas instituciones a poder disponer de sistemas, de herramientas que puedan, por otra parte, pasar a la operatividad, pasar a la explicación de los fenómenos que ocurren. Ahora bien, la realidad también nos muestra que hay una diferencia bastante importante entre lo que es la comunidad investigadora y lo que es la comunidad meteorológica. La primera tiene, digamos, como un objetivo fundamental la parte más teórica del conocimiento. Funciona mucho a base de proyectos financiados y proyectos que tienen unos objetivos, vuelvo a repetir, mucho más teóricos que lo que ocurre en los servicios meteorológicos, cuya principal tarea es la operatividad, es decir, poder proporcionar información de una manera directa. Entonces, en principio son dos comunidades que podían estar trabajando de manera distinta, pero yo creo que tienen que trabajar de manera complementaria. Podríamos decir que son dos sectores que están condenados a entenderse. Porque por una parte, los proyectos, si no tienen una aplicación clara, finalmente cada vez tienen menos sentido Y por otra parte, quien tenemos que implementar esos proyectos, si no los tenemos previamente realizados, difícilmente podremos avanzar. Es decir, que aquí deberíamos plantearnos pues, el colaborar muy estrechamente, desarrollar o plantear, diseñar proyectos desde el principio con las dos comunidades involucradas, no como ocurre muchas veces que un proyecto ya está en marcha y entonces nos llamamos unos a otros para decir, bueno, ¿cómo podemos apoyarnos? No, desde el principio deberían estar las dos comunidades funcionando de manera continua. Hay problemas, sobre todo desde la parte de los servicios meteorológicos en la disponibilidad de personal. Normalmente no hay mucho personal suficientemente cualificado para poder colaborar de manera muy intensa, muy directa con la universidad o con la comunidad investigadora en general. De hecho, hay veces que es hasta problemas administrativos. Muchas veces para poderte presentar a un proyecto tienen los distintos componentes, los distintos investigadores que ser doctores, y muchas veces no tenemos falta de este tipo de personal dentro de nuestros servicios, con lo cual podemos tener problemas relacionados a la hora de poder avanzar. Pero yo creo que es un tema que se puede ir solucionando y que se debe ir solucionando en el tiempo. Realmente, incluso ese problema, podríamos decir falta de doctores, puede ser una muy buena oportunidad. Si se establecen colaboraciones específicas pues para desarrollar distintas tesis doctorales enfocadas a resolver los problemas operativos de un servicio meteorológico, pensando en temas de teledetección, en temas de modelización numérica, de difusión de la información y, como se acaba de comentar, no olvidándonos tampoco del sector social. Es decir, la sociología normalmente no se acaba de tener en cuenta dentro de este tipo de proyectos. Siempre estamos pensando en temas de física, en temas de climatología, pero realmente los aspectos sociales son fundamentales para poder, digamos, hacer lo importante en un sistema de alerta temprana. Que lo importante, evidentemente, es hacerlo, es elaborarlo, pero lo fundamental es que llegue. Si esa información no llega de una manera inteligible y una manera que pueda ser utilizada por parte de los distintos sectores, por parte de la sociedad en general, pues no vale para nada todo lo demás que se ha hecho. Es decir, que una parte importante, el cómo traducir, transmitir esa información, es también uno de los elementos fundamentales a la hora de establecer la cooperación, la colaboración, comunidad investigadora, servicios meteorológicos. Y para acabar, la CIMED, lo que es la Red Iberoamericana de Servicios Meteorológicos, ¿cómo puede colaborar? Fundamentalmente apoyando todo este tipo de iniciativas. Realmente, al ser una comunidad de servicios meteorológicos, tenemos una gran capacidad para intercambiar expertos, para movilizar en un momento dado personal de un lugar a otro y, desde luego, para fomentar el desarrollo de foros intersectoriales, comunidad investigadora, servicios meteorológicos, tanto a nivel nacional como fundamentalmente a escala regional, ya que los problemas siempre van a ser muy parecidos de manera general entre los distintos servicios. Esto es todo. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamayo, for articulating some of the issues with regard to that collaboration between the Met services and the research communities, where often priorities are not the same, theoretically focused in one and very service-oriented, and need for immediate information to act, and the need for that collaboration and innovative ideas for how to engage Met service personnel who are often not involved in research to become more oriented in that way. I would like to highlight again the WMO Research Innovation in Region concept note and Science for Services, because those topics are explored and those were developed based on input from all of the regional associations within WMO, where we highlighted some of those best practices. And these are meeting the long-term goals 3 and 4 of the WMO, one targeted research and the other engaging in much better user-oriented services. So I'd like to wrap up by highlighting a few of the things that were said by our speakers. The importance of collaboration across disciplines and what that meant for reduction in casualties and fatalities in Brazil. The reason why it was necessary, of course, the disasters that had happened in the past. SEMADEM was formed, And they gather information from multiple sectors across different centers, including private sector, academia, government departments. They do not issue the alerts themselves, but they rely on the partners in civil defense to issue those things. And they consider not only the hydrometeorological hazards, but vulnerability, exposure, population, hydrogeology, all of those multidisciplinary factors. And they cited the success in the reduction of fatalities in recent examples in November, December, compared with previous heavy rainfall events, that they reduced those numbers, highlighting the success of this initiatives that they've implemented. Engineer Gonzalez noted in Region Association 3 how they're working on this initiative for early warnings, early action in response to the WMO call and the UN call, and how their 5 working groups are seeking to work better together, to get financing, to manage the different projects. Mr. Thompson highlighted Regional Association 4's research priorities that were established at its 18th session, and how the coordination and development of high-resolution modeling at sub-regional levels is really important for various sectors: hydrology, coastal and marine environment, atmospheric composition, and the importance of focusing on successes in transition of research to operation and learning from those, and embracing decision makers in co-designing, co-developing projects, and also the social science aspect. And Dr. Tamayo highlighted the importance of creating community, exchanging experts, and developing forum for dialogue and overcoming those differences, and using those collaborations to develop tools that enable the provision of services and really enhancing that science to services pipeline. So I thank you very much for all of our speakers. I'd like to have a round of applause for everyone, and I would pass on back to our moderator for the event. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a la doctora Arlene Lane por la moderación, al orador y a los panelistas de este segundo segmento. Agradecemos a todos los participantes de este evento que ahora llega a su fin. En primer lugar, el informe sobre el estado del clima en América Latina y el Caribe nos ha mostrado que 2001 estuvo entre el 6º y el 7º año más cálido a nivel global, y América Latina y el Caribe están dentro de ese registro y están sufriendo las consecuencias. También, por cierto, 2021 marcó el 7º año consecutivo en que se ha formado al menos una tormenta antes del inicio oficial de la temporada de huracanes en el Atlántico, tormenta con nombre, por cierto, también. Se han producido 21 tormentas con nombre. La aguda inseguridad alimentaria en Centroamérica se debió a diversos factores, pero sobre todo el doble impacto de los huracanes ETA e IOTA, y a los efectos económicos de la pandemia de COVID-19 que continúa afectando a nuestras sociedades, acoplada a otros factores antropógenos que vemos en el cambio climático. La aguda inseguridad alimentaria en Centroamérica, y además en este año un total de 7,7 millones de personas que estuvieron expuestas a altísimos niveles de inseguridad alimentaria, específicamente en Guatemala, El Salvador y Nicaragua. La región de América Latina y el Caribe se enfrenta pues con seguridad y seguirá enfrentándose a graves crisis climáticas, pero también socioeconómicas, societales en general, y debido a estos eventos hidrometeorológicos extremos, con el efecto COVID-19 que ha aumentado mayor problemáticas, y recientemente un factor suplementario que ha sido el impacto global de la guerra de Ucrania. En las presentaciones de hoy hemos visto pues la importancia del monitoreo y de las alertas tempranas para proteger a las poblaciones más vulnerables. Hemos tenido una excelente noticia, pues sabemos que ahora para enfrentar este aumento de situaciones y eventos extremos y ante la necesidad de un mejor monitoreo, la Asociación Regional 3 ha decidido la creación de un centro o un sistema de alertas tempranas para América del Sur. Ya se pasará a la fase de financiación y gestión, pero la buena noticia es que se ha decidido por consenso la creación de este centro o sistema de alertas tempranas para América del Sur. Para concluir, es importante subrayar que los esfuerzos de las Naciones Unidas, liderados por la OMM, tienen como objetivo establecer asociaciones para reforzar los sistemas de alerta temprana de peligros múltiples, como lo han dicho absolutamente todos los panelistas, hay un consenso en ese tema. Agradecemos la amplia participación de todos, en persona y en línea, en este evento que termina aquí. Entonces agradecemos a todos los que han hecho posible esta conferencia, en particular al Gobierno de Colombia que nos hospeda en esta hermosa ciudad de Cartagena. Y quiero subrayar que ha habido una extraordinaria audiencia de las Américas y el Caribe, pero también de muchos otros países. Los datos en línea no paran de subir, o sea que no voy a decir porque van subiendo, pues ya estamos por encima de los 2000. Gracias a todos y hasta el próximo año. Bueno, hago un anuncio ya fuera de nuestra sesión. Hay un panel dentro de un momento. Tenemos un pequeño receso y a las 11:30 comenzamos otro panel, ¿no? O dos paneles diferentes. Un solo panel. Ok, entonces tienen un receso y después pueden volver. Gracias.
Buenos días. Sobre la 1:30 vamos a tener un almuerzo en el 10º piso, entonces para que se queden en el siguiente evento y pasen a almorzar a la 1:30.
Hello, around 1 p.m., 1:30 p.m., we'll have a lunch on the 10th floor. If you want to join us, please feel free to join us.